Welcome back to the Ancestral Findings podcast. In the early decades of the American Republic, many of the nation's leaders came from families that had lived in the colonies for generations, often giving everything they had to the cause of independence and national unity. Among them was a man whose name may not be familiar to most today, but whose contributions helped preserve the country during one of its greatest threats. Daniel D. Tompkins was the 6th Vice President of the United States serving under President James Monroe. Though he never became president himself, he left a legacy of duty and personal sacrifice that deserves to be remembered. This is the story of where he came from, how he rose to power, and why history nearly forgot him. Daniel D. Tompkins was born on June 21, 1774, in the town of Scarsdale in Westchester County, New York. He came into a world still under British rule just 2 years before the colonies would declare their independence. His family roots traced back to England, where the name Tompkins derived from a form of Little Thomas's son, a patronymic surname found as far back as the 1300s in the county of Kent. The Tompkins family likely came to the American colonies in the mid-1600s during the Great Wave of English migration to the New World. His father, Jonathan Griffin Tompkins, born in 1729, was a well-respected local figure, a farmer, a judge, and a supporter of the patriot cause. He played a civic role in the community of Scarsdale during and after the Revolutionary War. His mother, Sarah Ann Hyatt, came from the Hyatt family of New York. The Hyatts, like the Tompkins family, had early English roots with possible Dutch ancestry in some branches, common in the Hudson River Valley. The Hyatt and Tompkins lines came together in a home that valued faith, education, and public service. Daniel was one of 11 children and grew up in a household where books were read, civic issues were discussed, and a sense of duty to country was instilled from an early age. The world around him was changing rapidly. As he came of age, the war for independence raged across the 13 colonies, and the ideals of freedom, representation, and self-governance became guiding principles for the young nation, and for Daniel himself. He was an outstanding student and enrolled at Columbia College, now Columbia University, in New York City. He graduated with high honors in 1795. At a time when higher education was reserved for the elite or the exceptionally gifted, his academic success marked him as someone to watch. After graduation, he read law under the well-known jurist James Kent, who would later become Chancellor of New York and author of the influential Commentaries on American Law. Daniel was admitted to the bar in 1797 and quickly began a legal career that placed him among the rising class of New York's civic leaders. In 1798, Tompkins married Hannah Minthorn, the daughter of a successful New York City merchant and alderman named Marius Minthorn. This marriage connected him with the commercial elite of the city, a strategic and personal partnership that helped open doors in political circles. Together, Daniel and Hannah had 8 children, though like many families in the early 19th century, they experienced the loss of several children in infancy or childhood. Tompkins first entered politics in 1801 when he was elected to the New York State Assembly. By 1804, he had been appointed to the New York Supreme Court. But politics, not the bench, was his calling. In 1807, he ran for governor of New York as a Democratic Republican and won, defeating Morgan Lewis. At just 33 years old, he became the chief executive of the most populous and economically powerful state in the Union. He served as governor for 10 years, from 1807 to 1817, winning re-election 4 times. During his tenure, he focused on reforms that benefited working families and the common man. He advocated for improved public education and infrastructure, but the defining period of his governorship came during the War of 1812. With British forces threatening New York, Tompkins made extraordinary efforts to protect his state. When the federal government could not raise enough funds to properly equip the militia, Tompkins personally stepped in, borrowing money in his own name and even mortgaging his property to ensure soldiers had weapons, uniforms, and supplies. His actions saved New York, but they cost him dearly. Though he expected to be reimbursed by Congress, he never was. And the strain of carrying such personal debt weighed heavily on him for the rest of his life. Nevertheless, his selfless service earned him wide respect, and in 1816 he was nominated to serve as vice president alongside James Monroe. Tompkins took office as vice president in 1817. His years in the national spotlight, however, were marked by declining health and increasing debt. His earlier sacrifices had not only emptied his finances, but also taken a toll on his mind and body. He missed many Senate sessions, struggled to manage his affairs, and slowly withdrew from the duties of office. Though Monroe's presidency is often remembered as a time of relative calm and prosperity, Tompkins remained a troubled figure in the background, well-meaning, but often absent. His condition deteriorated further in his second term, and his attempts to receive reimbursement for his war debts continued to fail. Political allies began to distance themselves, and his reputation suffered. Even so, those who knew him well never doubted his sincerity, his patriotism, or his earlier achievements. But the vice presidency, for all its prestige, offered little comfort or support in his final years. He left office in March 1825 and died just 3 months later on June 11th at the age of 50. His death came quietly, overshadowed by the deaths and legacies of other, better-remembered founding-era figures. He was buried on Staten Island in the cemetery of the Moravian Church, far from the halls of power he once occupied. Today, a few places carry his name: Tompkins County in central New York and Tompkins Square Park in Manhattan. But little else remains to tell the story of a man who gave nearly everything he had for the country he served. He never published memoirs, and few personal letters survive. Still, historians recognize him as one of the most underappreciated public servants of the early republic. Daniel D. Tompkins did not become president. He barely finished his time as vice president, but he gave more of himself, financially, physically, and emotionally, than many of his peers. In a time of crisis, he stepped forward not with words, but with action. That alone secures his place in the early American story. If you've got a hard-to-find ancestor you're stuck on, I'd love to hear about it. Just head over to ancestralfindings.com and click on Contact to send me a message. While you're there, take advantage of our free weekly genealogy lookups. Explore thousands of articles and enjoy hundreds of podcast episodes. We've been helping family history researchers since 1995. And if you're looking for even more, check out our Genealogy Gold Q&A series over on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and as always, happy searching.